Here we are, folks. Welcome in at 8:05 to tonight's edition of Wave News Extra. Taking another peek, of course, from our SkyTrack camera network. And love to see, even if it's a quicker sunset, the sooner we get into the night, enjoying the nighttime lights of downtown over across the river from Jeffersonville. Let's hop right in here to the main studio, the Wave Now studio. I'm Jose Sosaya. Always appreciate you joining us as we unwind some of our top stories we've been looking at throughout the day. And of course, offering us some, exclusives here for our streaming audience, whether it's through the Wave Now app or for folks tuning in on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and X. We're going to have a couple of great in-studio conversations with some interviews, some sound from two of our crack reporting team, from our Logan Perone and our Alina Noakes. One, a pretty startling SWAT call and a standoff that took 8 hours to resolve, were some pretty, specific, nasty threats someone made on a Facebook Live. And of course, a really fascinating long conversation with the lead detective involved in the Crystal Rogers, what turned into her murder investigation. Just a lot of things that, unfortunately, in the course of the afternoon, Arlena Noakes can't insert everything that she discussed with the detective. But so here there's an opportunity for you folks to kind of, some questions you all might have had burning a hole in your stomach about what was going on in the case. Ultimately, what came of the 3 convictions for the men who were tried and found guilty this summer. Some of those questions, maybe you had them, and Alina asked those same ones tonight. So we're going to jump first into some of the stories we've been following throughout the day. One of them being some newly filed court records that show us and confirm that former Scott County Sheriff Kenneth Eubanks, he plans to plead guilty to tax evasion. He was arrested earlier this year. This was all part of the fallout of the sweeping corruption investigation into ex-Clark County Sheriff Jamie Knoll. So as far as Eubanks is concerned, his tax evasion charge stems from failing to report $145,000 in income from selling items. The bulk of the charge, $123,000 he paid to himself and his wife from his godmother's bank account, who suffers from dementia. Eubanks had been under scrutiny since before the Knoll investigation started. Indiana State Board of Accounts flagged payments that Knoll made to a company that Eubanks owned from the Clark County Jail's commissary fund. The audit says invoices lack details or proof of the work. The company was being paid while Eubanks was acting as a consultant. We're hearing there is a reaction there from Jamie Knoll's ex-wife, or estranged wife, Misty Knoll there. But back again, as far as Eubanks acting as a consultant to the Clark County Sheriff's Office, he worked there in the past before Knoll appointed Eubanks to the Scott County Sheriff's Office. However, a special prosecutor didn't charge Eubanks with any crime related to that income. A court date has not yet been set, though, for Eubanks to change his plea to then ultimately receive a sentence. But he does face a max of 2.5 years in prison. It's not likely he would go to prison for that long. So far, Eubanks marks the 5th person to plead guilty and avoid a trial stemming from everything that's surrounded and been uncovered in the Knoll investigation. Jamie Knoll, and you just heard a snippet there from his ex-wife, Misty, are serving their prison time. Their daughter, Casey, has wrapped up her jail time. Former Clark County Council member Brittany Ferre serving 2 years of probation. Once Eubanks' case is finished or complete, as it were, the last person charged as a result remaining is former Clark County Councilmember John Miller. If you remember in our reporting, we found out he lost his appeal challenging the case against him, and he is supposed to go on trial at the end of this month. Moving to some other stories we've been following on this Thursday, October 2nd. We've learned more about the fire that was ignited at this plant in Rubbertown out in West Louisville. Multiple crews, if you remember when we got the breaking news, they went out to try to confirm it was an explosion at around 11:30 at this Carbide Industries facility on Bells Lane. No reports of any worker who was hurt. PRP's fire chief telling us there was a fire burning inside and outside the building. As for the cause, they believe it started from a possible chemical overflow from one of the furnaces, but they still need to confirm that. That's why they're still investigating. Tonight, we learned that a PRP fire is no longer there monitoring. It seems like whatever they had to take care of as far as the indoor or outdoor fire that was taken care of. Crews telling us the small fire self-extinguished, so it burned and flamed out on its own, and that the cleanup is underway. Operations at Carbide Industries will continue as normal for the facility. Switching now to wrapping up, in essence, day 2 of the federal government shutdown and a budget debate starting to have its own impacts. There are reports that the food program for women, infants, and children, WIC, could run out of money by next week. A recent survey shows about a quarter of military families do rely on this program actively. Service members are among federal workers who are not getting currently paid. The White House saying it will soon use this shutdown as a reason to lay off some federal workers. Governor Andy Beshear talked about the move and the stalemate in his Team Kentucky press conference a little earlier on this Thursday.
He's going to fire thousands of federal employees. That's on him. He can't blame that on anybody else. Why? Because in other shutdowns, it hasn't happened. Our families are not a prop. They are not to be used as negotiating tactics or for leverage.
The governor says federal programs that come through Kentucky are going to continue as long as they can monitor that and make sure the flow is going on. But he also added that WIC and SNAP benefits would continue at the time, but state leaders say they're going to be assessing those programs day to day. Coming back in here to the studio, a Metro councilwoman, so this was something that was confirmed through the channels, through leaders, but multiple families tonight want to let others know about a potential pitfall, what they believe is actually, in their mind, a ring of criminals that work together to illegally transfer people's deeds to their homes. Pretty shocking stuff there. I'm going to show you some of the video we're able to gather a little earlier today. And this is 89-year-old Dorothy Turpin. She's owned her home on 26th Street for more than 50 years now, but recently her family found out someone filed a fake deed claiming Dorothy passed away. Dorothy's very much alive. Her family says scammers acted like the house was theirs, posting a for sale sign in front of the house and moving all of Dorothy's belongings out of the property. So that was Metro Councilwoman Tammy Hawkins. And she confirmed the person responsible, Russell Cheatham, turned himself in, but Dorothy's family is now prepared for a long court battle. Hawkins says, although the Jefferson County Clerk's Office reports lower numbers of this crime, she believes scams like this are happening actually about once a week. Well, now Hawkins and Dorothy's family says they want the community, A, to stay alert, and B, for Cheatham to pay for his actions.
All of her valuables, her jewelry, her clothing, her appliances, her furniture. He took it all. That is an empty house. So we also need you charged with theft, Russell. And I intend to stay on this and follow it all the way to the end of the journey.
Now, Cheatham was booked into Metro Corrections. He's charged with criminal possession of forged instrument and theft of identity of another without their consent. A spokesperson for the clerk's office this afternoon telling us they recommend all property owners actually sign up for a program called Clerk Alert. It's a system that lets people know when records are filed in their name. And actually coming up a little later tonight on Wave News at 11, this was the story our Julia Richardson dug into to talk to Dorothy's family, getting a sense and a case of context of how often this might be happening and just sort of the mechanics of how someone would go about, in this case, alleged fraud, because we'll have to wait for the court to play it out. But pretty startling allegations nonetheless. So make sure to stay tuned tonight for Wave News at 11. Julia is going to walk us through how this was uncovered and what's next for prosecutors, and letting people know that this is a threat, maybe in particular for some of our older family members who may not know otherwise what is going on. One more thing, as we're going to have a pretty busy back half of tonight's stream here in the Wave Now studio. For Cards fans, you may have noticed this past Saturday, a U of L ball boy, his name is Zephion Wade. He woke up thinking it was going to be another game day, ready for the Cards' first road test against Pitt. He wasn't able to go to sleep much after that night because there was nonstop buzzing of his phone after everything that unfolded on the field that afternoon. And today, our Dusty Baker got to talk to him about I guess, that interaction that put his face on those national TV screens.
Go Cards, baby. That's our ball. It was the battle for the ball seen round the world.
He may hear some of our talks and watched our team play, and he wanted to win as much as any of us.
As senior ball boy Zeph Wade became a viral sensation after attempting to fend off a pair of Pitt Panthers.
I didn't expect this to go viral or anything. I was like, I've been telling everybody around. I was just trying to do my job.
His job to protect and retrieve the football, one specifically prepared to fit the needs of U of L quarterback Miller Moss.
We as equipment managers put a lot of work into creating these footballs, mudding them, getting them prepared for game. I know a lot of people are like, well, it's just one ball, but to us, it's not.
How long is the process of mudding it?
It takes a long time. I'd probably say we could, when we really all lock in and get it all together, we could get it all done in a week.
Considering the importance of these footballs, Wade has made it a goal to retrieve every single one, including the ones that end up in opposing teams' hands.
My bosses emphasize to get the balls back after a turnover or even if the ball is thrown out of bounds. And so that's all I was trying to do.
After Pitt intercepted that very ball and took it back the other way for a touchdown, Wade stuck to his duty, battling for what he knew belonged to the Cards.
Like, we know that Pitt, they like to, dunk the ball. I seen him, beeline towards the stands. And so I'm like, okay, he's finna throw this ball into the stands. And that's happened before. Like, I remember I went in, I knocked the ball and like it jarred out and I caught it. I caught it like this and then I had it. I'm just finna, turn, give the ball to the referee, get ready for the next possession. And as I turn, I just feel like, arms. And I'm like, oh my God, like what's going on? And they're grabbing me. And then the other Pitt guy, he grabbed it like this and threw it. I just go like this. And I'm like, well, okay. And then I look, I see the ball into the stands.
And in the fourth quarter, everything changed.
Once we got that ball back by the beginning of the fourth quarter, it was crazy timing.
As the Cards staged a comeback victory and the ball returning to its rightful owner.
Me getting the ball back wasn't just a me thing. It was a team effort. The Pitt equipment managers and the Pitt security, they really helped. Because as soon as that ball hit my hands, we scored the game-tying touchdown by Jaleel, and then Nate scored the next touchdown after the pick from TJ. It was just a crazy change of events after we getting the ball back.
Well, he definitely, stood up for the Cards, and we're proud of him.
Woo!
All right, thanks to Dusty Baker on that one. Well, Zeph, we got to meet him, and as Dusty got to hang out a lot quiet with him, but his passion for sports and, of course, Cards athletics is evident. He's graduating this spring with a degree in sports administration, a minor in sports media. Perhaps you might imagine it won't take long for a team to scoop him up after proving that he can handle pressure in some of the bigger moments on the biggest stage. So, all right, thanks to Dusty. We're going to hear from the sports team, of course, tonight, coming up on Wave News at 11. Let's take you outside real quick for another view of our downtown nightlife and the skyline, as it were, with the bridge right there in the foreground. Hope you stick around tonight for more Wave News Extra. Shout out to Nathan joining us on YouTube. Shout out to Nathan. We're going to play for you next is first my conversation here in studio with our Logan Perone about that standoff with SWAT and how that was resolved after 8 hours. And after Logan wraps up, we're going to have our Alina Noakes in here breaking down parts of her long, in-depth, fascinating conversation with Detective John Snow, who was the lead detective in Crystal Rogers' case. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with much more of tonight's Wave News Extra. Welcome back in, everyone, to this portion of tonight's stream here on Wave News Extra. Again, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, pretty busy one, but happy to have so many members of our team here in studio to discuss the busy work and the reporting they've been doing for reporter Logan Perone today. Logan, that was kind of unpacking what started off as a pretty disturbing case, or someone kind of making what would be those very dangerous comments online. That's what gets police's attention, scaling it up to something even greater. Right. And then sort of walk us through the timeline, because ultimately this ended in a guy's arrest, but perhaps uniquely so because the people around this neighborhood got a pretty good look at what was going on.
So it was actually the folks that had called it in. Essentially what it was, guys, was someone who was making threats. Again, that's the key thing. It wasn't just comments online. It was threats through a Facebook Live. His name is 45-year-old. Oh my goodness, where we got it here?
We got it right here. I believe you said it's Robert DeLul.
I want to make sure I pronounce it right. I have that little pronouncer there.
And I'm going to set up that right there.
He's right here. So he was arrested for making these terroristic threats, is what he's charged with. 2 counts of terroristic threats, as well as 1 count of violating an EPO, DVO. That's just some form of protective order, folks. And really what happened here is around 4 o'clock, they were alerted that he was on Facebook Live making direct threats to not just kids, but he said J-Town, Louisville, and then officers get out on scene. He starts making threats to the officers, saying he's going to kill them. We got all that from the arrest citation. So ultimately, the police on scene, they call in SWAT. There's a standoff. It lasts 8 hours, Jose. 8 hours of a standoff, and from there, police just had to wait him out. And this entire time, he's on Facebook Live, just saying, hey, I'm not coming out. A lot of profanities. They're still up, as far as I know, as of us recording this. Mm-hmm. They're still up on Facebook. Yeah, a lot of profanities. He's saying, I'm not coming out. I'm not doing anything. Saying a lot of things. And that was just like for the entire time. At one point, he takes his clothes off. We didn't show that in our broadcast earlier today. It gets pretty deep there, guys.
I was going to say, disturbing to say the least. Yeah. We've separated some elements of what Logan's been able to report on today. We want to walk you through, but this is just sort of give you all at home kind of the impression of what police and ultimately these SWAT negotiators, what they were dealing with. What we're about to play, was this kind of early on before SWAT got to the scene, Logan?
This was actually as SWAT was on scene. So this is what you're seeing here is the first is a threat while or before police are on the scene.
Okay.
And then it continues. This is the original threat that kind of got him.
We'll play that
in
first.
Some trouble.
9 o'clock, I'm going to blow your place apart. Gaytown, you're in my sights. Louisville, you're in my sights. I'll kill your kids. I'll be at their school. They're dead. How's your kid?
So yeah, pretty no mincing words there. Threatening directly at children, at schools, and then generally at Louisville and J-Town. Mm-hmm. So again, just something that the police didn't want to take lightly.
The words were pretty menacing. Like I missed to say, we just played that.
And not to mention, folks at home, like this was someone who was not. That's just a snippet. When I'm talking, there were multiple live streams across multiple accounts over multiple hours. So this was something that had gone on before police got there, while police were there. And then almost it looked like up to the moment that they pulled him out. The last video that I was able to find on his Facebook was of him in the shower. He had at some point said he got sprayed with tear gas. Again, obviously SWAT was out there trying to get him to come out. So it was a serious situation. And he was still streaming the entire time that this was going on. And at one point, Jose, these things are serious, but it was shocking to me more than anything to see him at the window yelling at police saying, I'm not coming out. You guys this, you guys that, things I'm not going to repeat on the stream. And And not only did we get an inside view, we also got an outside view. So we have a viewer.
Okay, so I'm going to pull that video
Yes.
up first, and you can walk us through kind of the different angles of this,
Yes.
because I mean, sometimes it's hard for us, like after an event like this, what you're looking for is that video vantage point to kind of get us as close to being at the scene with the people who are involved. But call this perhaps good fortune for us that, again, nobody was hurt, Logan, but
Yes,
the fact
nobody
that you
hurt.
could see this from multiple different angles and that gives you a bigger, clearer picture of what was going on. So let's, why don't we play this
that
while
out.
you're talking about it? There we go.
So this was video from his next door neighbor. They tell me that Delul had only lived there about 2 years, but that maybe not to this scale, but police at his residence was a common thing. As far as I know, the young man that we talked to, we'll leave that to the full report actually. But he had said, I had interacted with him at my work. I had interacted with him, just fist bumping him out. He had gone through some personal things, and you got to wonder what was going on through Delul's mind as this was playing out. Obviously, again, no excuse for the threats, but you got to wonder what was playing out in his mind. But his neighbor gave us some insight, said, yeah, police were there all the time. There were issues between him and his ex-girlfriend. Again, part of the reason that they got called out were not just threats towards the kids, but the ex-girlfriend, her new boyfriend, and then police when they showed up. So, it was a shock to him that it got to this scale, I think. But at some point, early on, it was evidently clear that this guy had caused some trouble in the neighborhood. And that was just the one guy who was willing to share his experience with us on camera. I heard from at least 2 other neighbors and one person, Jose Enough, who was at a friend's house across on the next one over, the next
So for-
cul-de-sac over.
So if
said
let's
he
say
had
we're here, that's the house that police came to, and like literally we're talking
the one that almost like backs up to
backs up
his
to it.
backyard.
Okay.
He said, yeah, he drove up to me, actually said, hey, I'm going to come check out the house. Because one, he wanted to see the damage, which we have video of here. But
can set
2,
that up
we
for sure.
also, he was like, yeah, I've heard him scream out here before. So this was something that had gone on for a while. I want to show you that damage. We actually got out there today as Metro Codes and Regs was out there. And again, in almost a cruel twist of a kick a guy while he's down, because obviously this guy, in jail tonight. When I got there earlier in the day, he had a citation on his door for all the damage
That was
that was
done.
done by SWAT, which again, just I wasn't sure what I was looking at. So I zoomed in my camera as close as I could and said, there it is. Codes and Regs hit him with a fine for the damage that.
Oh, we
SWAT
saw the
did to
door
property.
frame right
Yeah.
there, didn't we? I mean, it's evidence of kind of
It
what
is, yeah.
what the SWAT crews had to do. One more element, Logan, that we did want to share with folks, if you want to kind of tee up part of the tense. I mean, it was tense from the get-go, but perhaps this was that interaction that at least told SWAT negotiators just how delicate the situation was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, when you have a guy who's yelling through the window, telling the police, "I'm on Facebook Live. I'm not coming out." I mean, this was hours of video that you can scroll through on Facebook Live, and we just show a snippet of, for you here. The video that we're about to show you. I mean, he's right in front of the window yelling at the SWAT teams, and you hear them multiple times on the other end from our viewer video. Hey, man, come out. No weapons, nothing. Honestly, you could mix them together, Jose. From the outside, come on out. I'm not coming out.
Mm-hmm.
The sound from the other folks saying, oh my gosh, SWAT's going in.
You could almost split the screen if you wanted to, like saying like as they're interacting,
almost like a
it's
movie.
got movies, cameras inside.
It sounds crazy and again, I'm not putting in a light situation. This was a serious SWAT
Sure.
situation. Thankfully, no one was there, but you could almost make it like a movie.
Right.
One cut here outside, response on the inside. They went back and forth. Again, this took 8 hours, and it was 12:08 in the morning, just over midnight this
Mhm.
morning on Thursday that police were able to finally go in and get him out.
Mhm.
They got there around 4. So 8 hours this neighborhood was on edge. I want to show you that video now. Again, I muted the video just in case. Make sure we didn't get any late
I got you.
opportunities, but you can see the lights inside the house.
Right.
And this is again when he was addressing earlier. But again, if you go through it, folks, if you're able to find it on Facebook, I've chosen not to link it just based out of profanities.
Well, we're exercising
there's
editorial control. It's
other
fine.
there's other aspects. His family. We don't want to put them anywhere, but online, he was just constantly back and forth to the police. It was just something insane. And, our one guy that was willing to go on camera to talk with us, a young man, he told us, hey, I'm relieved that, he's not immediately next door, because, in some of those videos that are on his Facebook, not from yesterday, but, days prior, he's throwing a gun out. He's showing that he has a weapon. And so that's, I think, also where part of the concern comes from. You don't want to mess with some guy. There's his mugshot, Robert DeLuel, 45. Again, 2 counts of terroristic threatening, 1 count of violating a protective order. He's actually due back in court, guys, tomorrow morning.
And I have to imagine, even if, let's say, because it happens early in the morning, your own interest in just seeing where the case goes, even though he is in custody, just to say, I guess, whatever prosecutors will bring up for his arraignment, Logan, just to see, I guess I would be curious to see when you're talking about making those kind of specific threats, like even with the charges that you've laid out, like if that at all influences his bail, whatever that would be, and sort of what the punishment is on the table. Because it sounded like, these were not vague. They didn't sound like vague threats.
No. And part of the stuff that doesn't get included here are specific names. In fact, the one thing that I censored in editing this content was a specific last name and saying, how is your kid? These were direct threats at specific people and he was like, hey, I'm going to get your kid at school. And I'm sure if he knows that person's last name, knows they have a kid, I have a feeling that, these were not just vague. I'm going to, and as you said there, he said, I'm going to kill your kid. I don't think that's vague at all. I think that's a very direct threat. And then it goes a step further when he says, J-Town, you're on my list. Louisville, you're on my list. So, just things we got to think about going into his arraignment tomorrow.
Excellent. All right. Well, I appreciate our Logan Perone breaking those things down. A reminder, Logan puts all the time and effort into his report, which is going to be up on wave3.com. We'll certainly go ahead and break that down as a reminder of what this case entails tonight on Wave News at 11. A reminder also before you go, Logan, where folks can reach out to you as you're out working on stories throughout the week.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me. I am on Twitter, formerly Twitter, I guess. Logan Wave 3. I'm on Facebook, Logan Wave 3 as well. You can also email me at logan.perone@wave3.com. I love story tips. I love good banter and anything sports related.
Well, that's going to be, we're not going to call this as, this is not Eagles green, but that's fine. Now his focus is on postseason baseball.
Yes.
And we'll stir that pot when the time comes to have our Dusty Baker and our Logan Perone in studio.
All the time.
I'll have to get a third chair. All right. Thank you, Logan. Appreciate you. We'll be right back with a commercial break here on Wave News Extra. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, folks, thanks again for sticking with us here on Wave News Extra Time to make room for our Wave News troubleshooter and reporter, Alina Noakes. If you followed us here, of course, in the Wave Now studio, Alina, as I describe her, our eyes and ears really for much of the summer, and these blockbuster cases involving the three men who ultimately were convicted in what happened to Crystal Rogers, and an opportunity, Alina, that sort of, we maybe didn't know we were going to have until after these trials wrapped up, to listen and talk to a character so integral to the investigation that helped prosecutors was the lead detective, John Snow.
Yeah, I mean, really had the primary role from the very beginning. 5 years of the investigation he was in charge of through the Nelson County Sheriff's Office, starting from day one when they found the car on the Bluegrass Parkway and he detected that something was not right, thought this was not just a normal missing persons case. And that's when his suspicions started surrounding the people in Crystal Rogers' life. During this conversation with him, we really delved into how soon the suspect pool kind of came into play. He knew of Brooks Houck, basically at the July interview where he started being suspicious of whether or not he was telling the truth about his timeline, about his connection to Crystal. On top of that, Steve Lawson and that phone call he had with him during that interview becomes a part that we talk about extensively as well. Really just the connection of these people. One thing I found out is for him, Joseph Lawson was kind of an out of the blue and unexpected character. Sure. He didn't really think about it until he was read in on the case until much later when KSP and the FBI had taken over. And of course, we know that he kind of followed through after that as the lead from the very beginning. Sure. So these are all really interesting things we delved into when it came to evidence, testimony, suspects, all of that. And we have that full clip in our web story over on wave3.com. But what I really wanted to take to him were some questions we know that viewers had about this case, about the characters that are involved here. And one that we really got after the trial of Steve Lawson, who was tried first in the case, whereas Brooks and his son, Joseph Lawson, were tried together, was that Steve Lawson, to everybody's surprise, testified on his own behalf. That's something very unusual when it comes to murder cases, but it's something that he did do. And so I asked him, we heard during the Steve Lawson trial that he admits that he was on the Bluegrass Parkway. Won't say as much as what prosecutors wanted him to say about what his exact role is, sure, but enough, obviously, that the jury didn't believe that he was being truthful about his role on the Bluegrass Parkway. And in fact, John Snow says it was disingenuous the way that he thought that Steve Lawson was telling his story. But when I really was talking to him about it, the question we had from viewers was, how can he say that? How can the defense in Brooks Houck's trial put up a completely opposite defense? As we know, they say Steve Lawson was never on the Bluegrass Parkway and was on Boston Road instead, which is just south of the BG. And so their argument was he wasn't there. But the jury in Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson's case, they can't know that. They
were supposed to be completely barred or bubbled away from that very key piece of evidence, or at least testimony.
Exactly. And they're not supposed to know anything from the result of Steve Lawson's case to give them a fair and unbiased jury when it comes to the prosecution of Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson. So I thought this would be an interesting question to ask him of how it feels when you're a detective, when you're anybody in the courtroom as a member of the prosecuting team, having to sit there and listen to a defense attorney argue something that the person that they're talking about has already said is not true.
It becomes very irritating when you know he's lying and you can't say that. You can't get up there and say that he admitted to being on the Bluegrass Parkway. And you can't compel Steve Lawson to testify in this trial and say that. So you're just kind of stuck there biting your tongue, basically, and hoping that the jury sees through the smoke screen.
It's very easy to tell Detective Snow's frustration hasn't diminished based on that particular exchange where it's like he's sitting in the gallery in the audience and you're like, that's not true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can imagine everybody, we definitely heard from viewers after the fact of like, why is this happening? Why can't he say it? It's not true. And it's just the legalities of it. And that's one thing that he also talked about was recognizing that there are some things that, he wishes as a detective would be admissible and are ruled inadmissible before trial. There's all kinds of nuances when it comes to these legality issues. And so he really talked about that being the primary thing and one of the, frustrating factors when it comes to this specific instance of you having two completely conflicting defenses. But at the same time, every defendant is allowed to put up their own defense, and it's up to a jury to believe them. That's that, reasonable doubt aspect that,
And the burden of argument that you have on both sides for
absolutely.
prosecutors. and
Prosecution
defense.
has the burden of proof.
That's right.
And so that was something that they, obviously that's what you're trying to prove to a jury. And you've got to overcome that hill, without them knowing
Yes.
what happened in a prior trial.
So again, as I described, you as part of our team, of course, our eyes and ears, we had the sketch artist to kind of get us as close as possible to seeing people's body language or emotion in the courtroom. And the bevy of characters, many of them who did take the stand, and we sort of heard how they were tied to each of the three men. But one character whose name has come up repeatedly, and I know was a part of some of your conversation with Detective Snow, was Brooks Houck's brother, Nick Houck, and sort of his role from very early on in Detective Snow's investigation, as far as we know, when he first got into figuring out how everything was connected.
Yes, absolutely. Nick Houck, obviously not present during the trial, sentencing, any of the phases. But he was a person that we've talked extensively about from the very beginning. When I talk about that July 8th interview being pivotal for Jon Snow and what he thought about Brooks Houck, that same concept applies to Nick Houck specifically. At the time, he was a police officer with Bardstown Police Department, and he called his brother in the middle of the July 8th interview. And we know during that exchange, you guys have all heard it before, that he basically tells him to stop talking to Jon Snow. And Jon talks about the fact that he was denied an interview, that Nick Houck did not want to talk to him. He later does talk to investigators at a different point in time. But he immediately reported that incident between the two brothers to the sheriff. We know that things continued from there, that eventually Nick Houck was fired from the Bardstown Police Department. But I asked him how, and this is something he's not going to really disclose during the 10 years since this has happened, but how does it make you feel as a member of law enforcement when you've got another member of law enforcement, not someone who's distantly connected.
It's a close partner agency.
A close partner. I mean, if you're from Nelson County, you know that they work out of the same little strip right there. And so someone who's from a partner agency, you're working out of the same county, close proximity, how does that impact your thought of something like this when you have another person in law enforcement interfering with your investigation?
So we're going to play that for you right here.
When you have another member of law enforcement interfering with your investigation, how does that make you feel as the lead detective on a case like this? And it's not someone that's like distant, like a law enforcement officer advising his brother that lives in a different state, a different county, somewhere else. It's someone who lives right in this community interfering with your investigation. How do you take that?
I mean, it makes you mad, but when you say back the blue, when this individual starts interfering with a homicide investigation, to me, he's no longer the police. He's no longer a police officer, right? He is, quite frankly, he's a suspect if he's interfering in the case, because if he's not guilty of being part of the murder, he's certainly guilty of trying to help cover it up, And so, as Mr. Young indicated during the trial, and we've on multiple occasions said that we firmly believe that Nick is tied into this and involved in it. So it becomes pretty evident that he is not anybody who wears that badge that is willing to put themselves involved in something like this has no business wearing it to begin with.
It's a pretty strong statement from Detective Snow.
Absolutely. And you're talking about the connection here. Obviously, we know that Nick Houck and Rosemary Houck, Brooks Houck's mother, were called by prosecutors to be unindicted co-conspirators during the trial. So there's that belief. Really, it started from the very beginning. And so that was just part of our conversation surrounding Nick Houck. But not just the fact that there's this distrust or this sense of betrayal when it comes to the badge, but also what that meant for the community and for his investigation. You've got to imagine you're in Nelson County, like you said, close working agencies when it comes to something like this, and you've got something like this that happens. It created for them a bit of the right word, confusion, maybe distrust for the public.
And you could argue it certainly muddied the waters, or it's just like saying like this did it inhibited him from being able to do his job as far as like, we were talking about our commitment to doing this, lawfully and ethically. Like, it was saying like we were not carrying ourselves in a way that was going to ever be judged. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Detective Snow, in this case, it's like, I know my job. I was going to do everything as it needed to be done so that justice was fair and balanced and blind. But even, as perhaps the initial conversation happens of like, who makes the call to try and quash that conversation or that interview. And I guess, the rumor mill, he might argue that was the frustrating part, that it just started to spread.
Well, I think for him, it was the fact that you've got a close-knit community, a member of law enforcement acting in this way, and you're expecting people to come forward to tell you information. It's, Bardstown has been impacted by this substantially on a very personal level for many people. And so when it comes to the impact this has had from the beginning on getting people to come forward, that became a real problem with it inhibiting his investigation in a lot of ways.
Well, I will tell you that from our perspective, it was really hard when it became apparent that another law enforcement officer had the potential for being involved in this case. And I think that generated a great deal of distrust for the community in us. And I'm not blaming them for that. You know, for better or worse, when you are sister agencies in a community, you're connected in people's minds. They don't really see a difference between Bardstown City Police and the Sheriff's Department or any other police department in that jurisdiction for that matter. I mean, yes, you are a different patch, but when they see a community law enforcement, local law enforcement, they really view you all in that same light. And so when there is that shadow around that individual, he's casting that shadow on the rest of the law enforcement in that community. And I think that really was a hindrance to us in this investigation because people were hesitant to talk to us. They were hesitant to share information that they knew. And that becomes even more clear when you know, 10 years later, when you're prosecuting the case and people are sharing information with the FBI and with the state police that they did not share with you, that they had the opportunity to and did not tell you. You know, that distrust that they had developed because of that connection becomes abundantly clear.
Certainly, you know, after all these years, it feels like he could have argued, and like, not to say that, you know, these are not Detective Snow's words. It's like saying like, perhaps if that hadn't happened, more people would have felt comfortable and trusting to come forward and to see how much more information they could have gleaned to try to solve this case faster. But that fear of someone getting involved in a way they shouldn't have made them fearful for, I guess, retaliation is a way to describe it.
Sure. I think that they generally thought that this is not a good look, for one. But on top of that, I mean, you're trying to get an understanding of why, you know, there's this certain level of distrust. I mean, he talks about that there because it was legitimate. During the trial, you had people who took the stand, who they played interviews of, who had talked to KSP, who had talked to the FBI at different points, but had the opportunity and had at some point talked to local detectives as well in those early days of the investigation when they came to some of these key figures, like especially Stephen Lawson. And so That's where he's referencing the fact that, you know, it would be years that went by, and he wonders if that played any kind of role in their willingness to come forward and
Mhm.
tell the truth initially. I mean, again, a close-knit community, a lot of people who knew of each other or knew each other in some, you know, very connected way. And so you've got this really conundrum of players here.
You know, you're in a quagmire, and I'm curious, you know, for someone like Detective Snow, who, you know, it was, you know, we came into the courtroom 10 years after the fact. This was 5 years after he retired, but him being a community member, you know, perhaps he would describe it as he still wasn't fully, you know, removed from finding out, okay, like I've done with my career, but I'm a neighbor, and I'm a citizen here, and I'm going to find out what the conversation or what the update is on the investigation. And I know for perhaps the folks who've been following us through this whole story, Alina, and what adds almost like another wrinkle to the tragedy was, you know, in the search for Crystal, when they thought by that point it was a homicide, and the Ballards were searching day and night. And this was Crystal's parents, Tommy and Sherry Ballard. And we know, unfortunately, that Tommy Ballard was killed. The big question mark remains who and what happened to him at this point. And you know, that wasn't something that was able to be answered this summer over the course of the testimony or in the trials. But I have to imagine, if for someone, you know, who is a career detective like Detective Snow, that may be one of those, like he described it as shadows. It's like it's something that, I don't know if it haunts him, or it's a sort of something that he's still thinking about to this very day.
I think everybody in the community is thinking about Tommy Ballard's case and the fact that it hasn't been solved. We heard that referenced so many times during the trial and sentencing, especially at sentencing, when for the family, for the Ballard family, this is their next. This is not stopping with Crystal Rogers' case. They are looking to solve Tommy Ballard's next. And that's been, you know, for them always the goal is to solve both cases, not just the one. And especially knowing the kind of role that Tommy Ballard played in this, you know, like you said, he was essential to the investigation from the beginning in that he searched day and night. He was a relentless, on a relentless mission to find his daughter. And you can understand why. I mean, that would be for any dad. I know myself as a daughter to a dad that would do literally anything in a situation like this. You can relate to it. You understand the mentality. It was, I'm never going to stop. And so for him and his role in this, it was something that stuck with a lot of people. It breaks a lot of people's hearts, the fact that he was killed before he ever got that kind of answer. And I mean, to this day, the family still has so many unanswered questions. And so what I wanted to know about Tommy's case is, well, first of all, we learned Jon Snow is not connected to it. It was passed on pretty immediately. He was responded to where he was killed, shot and killed, but past that, the case pretty quickly got passed on to KSB, and they have control of that case. You know, as law enforcement officials, they don't speculate about other people's cases, and so he didn't attempt to do that here either. We know from our prior reporting and checking up on this case that it's still very much an open and active investigation, and KSB continues to look for information as to who killed Tommy Ballard. But on top of that, I really wanted to know for Jon Snow in looking for answers here, how much of a role did Tommy play? How much did what he did at the beginning really impact this investigation and bringing evidence forward, people forward, finding clues and tips and all this kind of stuff? And a lot of people have said that Tommy's case, in the community have said that Tommy's case or his role really pushed the investigation forward. But just how much, you know, more so than probably people thought. We talk about the Nick Houck aspect of it impacting negatively the investigation. In this case, Jon Snow really talks about the fact that it impacted Tommy Ballard's role impacted him positively.
So certainly we'll play that for you right here.
It is much easier for us to follow up on if people are telling us things in relevant time. But Tommy oftentimes would be the go-between because people were not comfortable bringing that information, to us, either due to the air of mistrust or due to fear of being involved or whatever the case might be. He would oftentimes be that buffer zone where they would tell him things and then he would relay that to us.
It's pretty chilling to hear that, considering many people believe that he was killed because he knew too much or getting too close.
Yeah, I don't know that we ever know exactly why.
No.
Whether he was close or he wasn't close, or it was just the fact that he was absolutely relentless in his pursuit. And I don't feel like he would have ever stopped until he found her, until he found her and found out what happened to her, and that he'd done everything that he could do to see that the people that were responsible for it had been brought to justice. And I think they knew that. I mean, he was very open about that, and he was very relentless.
So as you said, Alina, he declined to sort of really speculate on the reasons or the causes, but to say the least that he didn't minimize sort of just how crucial he was as sort of that liaison, that sense of someone who could be trusted to take any sort of usable information in the pursuit of trying to find Crystal.
Absolutely. I mean, think of Anna Whiteside's car. That's the grandmother of Brooks Houck. Her white Buick, I won't misstep on that, but a little white car
Sure.
was something that people claimed to have seen the night around July 4th, that rainy night. We heard from raccoon hunters about seeing that car. And then we know that when it was posted about on social media by Tommy Ballard asking if anybody had any information on this in relation to Crystal's case, that it very quickly ended up getting sold to a car shop here in Louisville, I believe.
Yes.
And then it became pivotal to the investigation, at least in the fact that we know that Jamie Brooks, who was a detective here in Jefferson County, who was working with Jon Snow, ended up, having a canine guy go out and try to see if they detected anything in the lot the car was in, led them straight to Anna Whiteside's car, detected the scent of human remains. All of these parts, like that wouldn't have been possible if Tommy Ballard, potentially wouldn't have been possible if Tommy Ballard had not asked about it and gotten somewhere with it with the community. And so, that just speaking one little bit to the kind of role and impact he played in this investigation, that's what he means by that. But on another level, he talked about the fact that there's this challenge when you're dealing with parents, as it would be for anybody in a professional role like this, that you've got to maintain some objectivity to your investigation. You've got to be able to have some kind of distance there to where it's personal, of course, because you're putting hours and hours into this. I mean, he said it occupied his mind more than anything else for the 5 years that he worked on the case, day and night. And you could tell that when the convictions came down, just the emotional release for him in the courtroom. So we're talking about the fact that this has just been such a big case, and to so many people, and very emotional, very personal. And for Tommy Ballard, it absolutely was that. And so for Jon Snow, when it came to working with people in the community, you got to imagine you're part of the community, you're working in the community, and you've got all of these vested interests. And so just a very interesting conversation around the role Tommy Ballard played and how it influenced this investigation.
I mean, fascinating for myself and for certainly so many viewers who are tuning in, Alina. And of course, here we're playing I'm trying to do a rough count in my head of, 4 plus 5 minutes of just part of the conversation you were having with Detective Snow, just for the folks at home to get a sense of how much you were talking. How much time did you spend talking to him?
We spent over an hour talking. I asked him a lot of questions. Some were just little like odds and ends and stuff, little follow-ups. But the total length of our interview that's posted on Wave News is about 45 minutes. But it's a good watch. It tracks very well. So you can follow pretty well what we're talking about. But we really go from talking about the early days of the investigation into those unanswered questions, the things he would like to still have the answer to, things that you guys have asked us about that I wanted to bring to him, things of that nature. So a lot of things you wouldn't have heard before, or questions you might have had during trial. I bet you I had the same questions, and we made sure to ask those as well. So that, of course, up on our website. Lengthy watch, but I would say it was a good conversation.
Worthwhile conversation for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, add this to another piece of excellent reporting and just trying to get as many perspectives as possible. Just shout out to Alina. But by the way, all the back years of reporting beyond just the summer, all the multiple visits and interviews we've had with the Ballard family, of course, recapping a lot of the testimony from court. So all that is there for you to watch on wave3.com, but make sure to give Alina's conversation with Detective Snow a look tonight. We'll certainly play portions of it as well tonight on Wave News at 11, but just certainly something we'll keep encouraging you to take a look at. It is worthwhile, I would argue. Alina, thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Jose.
We're going to be right back with a quick break here for commercials to reset for more of tonight's Wave Extras. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks, here to Wave News Extra. Appreciate you sticking around with us for those conversations with our Logan Perone and Alina Noakes. One more story tonight. The man who was ultimately convicted of stabbing and killing a 6-year-old boy from Kentucky is now walking free. The images you saw there of Ronald Exantis. Well, he's been granted parole, though he was serving a 20-year sentence tied to Logan Tipton's death in 2015. Tipton's family and many members out in the community are confused as to how a man convicted of charges, and that was the sentence, could be released from jail so soon. Reporter Samantha Valentino with our sister station in Lexington has reactions from the family as well as a forensic psychologist.
December 7th, 2015.
It's the day Logan Tipton's life came to a tragic end, and when the Tipton family first heard the name Ronald Exantis.
Exantis broke into my home and stabbed my 6-year-old son to death.
This week, the name Ronald Exantis came up again in a phone call the Tipton family says they never wanted to receive. After being sentenced to 20 years in 2018, Exantis has now been granted parole.
The justice system is all about the criminals and it's never about the victim. My grandson was just 6 years old. He never got to grow up, they didn't give him justice.
While this tragedy happened in Woodford County, the trial was held here in Fayette County. It's where a jury found Ronald Exantis guilty but mentally ill of stabbing Logan Tipton's 2 sisters and his father, but not guilty by reason of insanity of murdering 6-year-old Logan.
One of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life was come home and tell my kids that he was innocent from the murder. And they're young. They're saying, well, how is he innocent from the murder? We watched him do it.
Dr. Dustin Wygant is an EKU professor and the executive director of Integrated Behavioral Health.
The jury felt that there was sufficient evidence that his mental state at the time that the murder took place was sufficient to find him not guilty by reason of insanity.
In its opinion upholding Exantis' conviction, the Kentucky Supreme Court found each count could be considered individually, and the jury could have reasonably believed Exantis was lucid at points during the times of the attacks.
The jury must have concluded that for whatever reason in that separate time period, we're talking about a single kind of event, but that separate time period, that there wasn't sufficient evidence to find him legally insane.
In Woodford County, Samantha Valentino, WKYT.
Now, the Tinson family says they were notified that Exantis would serve 6 months of parole out of state. He's apparently in Florida. The Kentucky Department of Corrections telling us tonight he's going to remain under probation and parole supervision until the sentence expires, which is listed as June of next year. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. I want to remind you folks, of course, of a great resource in wave3.com. I'd love to, let you all know there's some really great stories and reporting. Credit here to our reporter, Marissa Burke, who had a very in-depth conversation with a museum CEO here in town after this video got a lot of attention online about just the experience of course, the Roots 101 and the experience of enslaved people, that conversation, and now subsequently what the reaction has been. But Marissa taking her time to have that conversation, and you can check in on her video report and her article on the wave3.com homepage. You can, of course, also see here Alina's part of Alina's reporting with her conversation with Detective John Snow, that interview, and many more stories there for you to check in on. Latest breaking news, updates, headlines from stories here in our neck of the woods and across the country, all there at your fingertips, not just on wave3.com, mind you, but also on the Wave News website. And as far as weather's concerned, also on the Wave Weather Now app as well. Well, forgive me for that. I was trying to clean something off here. But in essence, nonetheless, something we're always staying on top of, the digital team. And as we continue to work into the night, whenever those updates come in, we'll share them with you as well when we're getting ready right now for Wave News at 11. Always appreciate your time tuning in and checking in with us, whether that's through the Wave Now app, through your smart TV devices, or on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and X. We're probably going to let you all know the scheduling is going to look a little different for tomorrow on Friday, October 3rd. Just some scheduling and producing changes we're going to have to do. So a reminder, you can always get the latest information on TV, on air, on our website, on your apps, on the phone. We'll make sure to come back with the next edition of Wave News Extra, I believe would be next Monday, which will fall on October 6th. So just a heads up there on that. Always appreciate your time, folks. Again, Jose Sosaya in the Wave Now studio. Until then, we will see you soon.